History of the influenza vaccine. What is influenza? We know now that influenza or flu is caused by a virus, but for many years it was thought to be caused by bacterial infection. In 1892, German scientist Richard Pfeffer isolated a small bacterium from the nose of a patient with flu, naming it Bacillus influenzae. Early attempts of a vaccine during the 1918 influenza pandemic were based on this understanding, and it was not until 1930s when the influenza virus was identified that progress toward an effective vaccine and could really begin. Influenza, also known as the flu, is highly contagious respiratory illness which spread easily through the air when people touch contaminated surfaces. In many cases, the disease is mild with symptoms such as chills, fever, fatigue, and it can also be spread through a symptomatic infection in people who don't even know they are sick. But the flu can also result in serious complications, particularly in vulnerable people like young children, older persons, pregnant women, and people with medical conditions such as asthma, diabetes, or heart disease. The most common complication is pneumonia, typically caused by a secondary bacterial infection. Flu virus mutate very rapidly, and the uncontrolled spread gives rise to many different strains, which fall into two main types affecting human: influenza A and influenza B. This is the pandemic of 1918 in USA. The mother of all pandemic, the H1N1 influenza pandemic that swept across the world from 1918 to 1919, sometimes called the mother of all pandemics, involved a particular virulent new strain of influenza A virus. The first waves of infection in early 1918 resulted in mild illness, but the second wave later that year was more deadly. In 1918, pandemic is estimated to have infected 500 million people worldwide. 500 million people worldwide, killing between 20 and 15 millions. The resulting death rate were so high that life expectancy rates around the world dropped by several years, and more people are thought to have died as a result of a flu pandemic than ever over the course of the entire First World War. More people to have died as a result of the flu pandemic than over the course of the entire First World War. Researchers in the United States and Europe received to find an effective vaccine against influenza during the pandemic years, and their effort produced hundreds of thousands of doses, but they were targeting the wrong pathogen. Progress toward the vaccine. In 1933, British researcher Wilson Smith, Andrews, and Law at London National Institute for Medical Research made a breakthrough when they isolate and identify influenza virus. They found no bacteria in throat washing from patients with influenza and discovered that the disease was caused by virus. With support from US Army, the first inactivated flu vaccine was developed by Thomas Francis and John Salk at the University of Michigan. The vaccine was tested to safety and efficacy on the US military before being licensed for a wider use in 1945. Multiple strains. Researchers had long suspected that different types of influenza virus existed, as the blood of some influenza patients didn't develop antibodies to the strain isolated in 1933. During the testing period, scientists also discovered the existence of another strain of the virus, influenza B. In 1942, a new bivalent vaccine was developed that protected against both the H1N1 strain of influenza A and the newly discovered influenza B virus. During 1947, season researchers discovered that existing vaccines were inactivated against the flu virus circulating at the time. To investigate the virus in circulation, the World Health Organization established the Worldwide Influenza Center in 1948 and the Global Influenza Surveillance and Response System in 1952. Scientists could now manufacture vaccine based on the monitoring of virus strain in circulation around the world, updating the strain target by the vaccine in response. Effort to track the evolution and emergency of flu virus continue today, and scientists monitor both seasonal and potential pandemic flu strains because new strains appear frequently. The seasonal flu vaccine usually changes each year as scientists determine how the virus has mutated and spread. Each year, WHO recommends virus strain for inclusion in flu vaccine for each hemisphere, and different vaccines are developed targeting 3 or 4 strains of this virus predicted to be most commonly circulating in the coming flu season. Potential for pandemic. Influenza pandemic have occurred throughout history. Record document at least 3 well before 1918 and 19 pandemic, and another 3 have taken hold after in 1956, 7, 58, and 1968, 69, and in 2009, 2010. Influenza virus with pandemic potentially regularly emerge, but not all go on to cause pandemic. WHO work to monitor influenza virus with pandemic potential and to prepare for future influenza pandemics. Continued effort. Researchers are constantly working to develop new vaccine technologies to keep a step ahead of the virus. A live attenuated vaccine delivered in the form of a nasal spray was first licensed in 2003. A vaccine using recombinant DNA technology was approved in 2013, and additional influenza vaccine based on newer technologies are being tested in clinical trials. Despite these efforts, seasonal influenza still kill up to 650,000 people a year globally. Influenza is constantly evolving virus, and immunity to a single strain through infection or vaccination doesn't necessarily protect against new strains that develop. We know from experience there is likely to be another